Let's tackle a pretty common idea about history, maybe even a misconception. Many of us, when we picture the time between, say, 200 and 1300 CE, often called the Middle Ages, sometimes even the Dark Ages, we tend to imagine it as, well, a quiet period, a bit of a standstill for science, for engineering, especially for really fundamental stuff like understanding motion. It feels like knowledge just hit pause after the classical era. But the whole point of this deep dive, our mission really, is to completely repaint that picture for you. We want to show you how motion, this core concept, it wasn't forgotten or stagnant at all. It was actually being, well, perfected and evolved in a frankly different part of the world during those exact centuries.
And that's what's so incredibly fascinating. The sources we're drawing on here, these excerpts detailing the sheer ingenuity of engineers, thinkers in the Islamic world, they just completely reframe this period. They reveal this vibrant, living practice of knowledge. Not a lull, not at all.
Right. It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? Because, in Western philosophy at the time, Aristotle's ideas about motion might have seemed kind of frozen. There was maybe this suspicion about change, the heavens were seen as fixed, but elsewhere, something totally different was brewing. So we're going to explore how this fundamental idea, motion, it never really stopped. You said it.
Rerouted.
Exactly, rerouted. And if you look at the wider context, in Europe, motion often got tied up in theology, metaphysics, almost abstract, But across the Islamic world, think Baghdad, Damascus, Cairo, these amazing intellectual hubs, there was this powerful feedback loop happening. Scholars weren't just like dusting off Greek texts. They were actively building on them, building machines, observing stars, designing logic into physical things. They didn't just talk about motion, they built it. They made ideas move.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these minds. First up, these Banu Musa brothers. Tell us about them. How did they approach motion? The Banu Musa. Right. 3 brothers, Muhammad Ahmad and Alhazen ibn Musa ibn Shakir. Polymaths, really, working in 9th century Baghdad. They wrote this hugely influential book, the Book of Ingenious Devices, around 850 CE, give or take. And it wasn't just sketches. It had detailed plans for over 100 mechanical devices. I mean, truly groundbreaking stuff. They described things they called structured motion systems. You'll probably recognize them now as, well, early programmable machines.
Programmable back then.
In a sense, yes. For instance, they had automatic refill systems. These used float regulators, basically, an early kind of feedback control. The water level itself triggers a valve to keep the flow constant. Simple idea, but a revolutionary execution. And they also invented this really clever valve logic, using fluid timing to control a sequence of events. Step 1 happens, then step 2, all timed by water flow. Plus, machines that could perform tasks in a set reconfigurable order. We could definitely call those early programmable motion loops.
Wow. So it wasn't just about making things move, but controlling how and when they moved.
Precisely. That's the motion theory verdict to them. They built what you could think of as recursive synchronization machines. They were mastering the timing, the rhythm, the response of structured motion, essentially creating early logic loops using physical flow, designing algorithms in motion centuries before we even had the concept of computer code.
That's mind-bending, embedding logic, algorithms into physical movement itself. Okay, so moving from mechanics, our next thinker, Alhazen, he seems to have shifted things again, looking at motion in a totally different context, the act of seeing itself.
Absolutely. Ibn al-Haytham, or Alhazen, living roughly 965 to 1040 CE, often called the father of optics, and for very good reason. His huge contribution, laid out in his Book of Optics, it completely changed how vision was understood. The old idea was light came from our eyes. He proved, experimentally, that light actually enters the eye from objects. But the key thing here, he treated light fundamentally as directed motion.
Light as motion, not just light.
Exactly. He studied reflection, refraction, angles of incidence, all properties of how light moves and changes direction. His theory was light travels in straight lines. Vision happens when these rays, this motion, move from objects into the eye. He even described how lenses work by bending light through their curvature. He called it structured motion distortion. The shape physically alters the light's motion path.
So his whole approach was based on light moving in predictable ways.
Yes, incredibly rigorous, experimental, and totally emotion-aware. The motion theory verdict for Alhazen. He saw light not as some substance, but as phase-resolved motion, meaning it has direction, timing, like a wave pattern. And his model for how we see it involves a sync alignment, a synchronization between these incoming motion patterns of light and how our brain processes them. He was formalizing motion-based input interpretation, making sense of the world through incoming motion.
Okay, from the Banu Musa's mechanical dances to Alhazen seeing light as motion, it's so clear motion wasn't static. Let's turn to our final innovator, al-Jazari. His machines sound almost legendary.
Oh, they really are something else. Ismail al-Jazari, working around 1206 CE. His machines, some sources say they weren't matched technologically for 600 years. His book, The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, is just meticulous, full of diagrams and explanations. He detailed things like incredibly precise water clocks, using what he termed feedback-controlled flow gates. Again, that idea of self-regulation, and automata complex moving figures powered by camshafts, programmable drum cylinders. Think of a sophisticated music box mechanism, but centuries earlier, he really mastered what we'd call sequential motion loops, where one action triggers the next, using water levels, floats, pulleys, intricate chains of events.
And you mentioned things like his elephant clock, peacock fountains. These sound like works of art, too.
Yeah.
But you're saying they were more than just decorative.
Much more. Yes, they were beautiful, but they were fundamentally sophisticated motion systems with phase triggers. They even had built-in error correction, ways to keep running accurately. And that key idea again, recursive control. The system's own state influences its next action.
So he wasn't just building things, he was almost programming with physical forces, like coding in metal and water.
That's a perfect way to put it. The motion theory verdict for al-Jazari. He literally encoded motion logic into matter. His devices show this kind of hardware-level recursion. Fluid motion wasn't just moving, it was responding, looping, resolving, making decisions based on physical states. He used gravity, buoyancy, rotation, the laws of physics to create stable, repeating, predictable behaviors. These were absolutely physical algorithms long before software.
Right. So let's connect the dots here. We have the Banu Musa, Alhazen, al-Jazari. What's the big picture when we put their work together? What's the common thread?
Well, when you look at them collectively, the legacy is just immense. Together, they built these early feedback loop systems controlling themselves. They defined light as directional motion, changing optics forever. And they created these incredibly advanced programmable vehicle systems. The unifying thread, I'd say it's that they didn't just theorize. They actively structured motion. They built their understanding into the physical world.
So it's more than just engineering. It's a whole way of thinking.
Exactly. It was a form of logical motion thinking. They showed that machines are, at their core, structured loops of motion. They showed that vision is fundamentally about detecting and interpreting motion, and that automation is about building recursive rhythm right into physical stuff, into matter itself.
And this is where it gets really fascinating for the bigger historical picture. How this knowledge, developed in the Islamic world, eventually found its way back to Europe.
Yes, that's the rerouting part. When Europe started hitting the Renaissance, rediscovering Aristotle and classical thought, well, these forgotten works started flowing back in. They were translated crucially from Arabic into Latin. And this influx, it helped reignite European interest in motion. But not just through abstract philosophy or theology, it came back infused with these practical applied concepts, feedback, structure, rhythm, the very things these engineers had mastered.
So the idea that motion just paused is completely wrong. It never stopped. It just took a different path and then rejoined the main road, so to speak.
Precisely. It rerouted.
So the key takeaway for you listening today is this. That period we often call the Middle Ages or even the Dark Ages. It wasn't empty. It wasn't stagnant. Not when it came to this kind of innovation. Far from it. It was actually buzzing with brilliant minds engineers, syncing time with gravity, using water flow like logic gates, understanding light as movement. They were building incredible sophistication into the world.
And it's so important, I think, to restore Alhazen, the Banu Musa, al-Jazari, to the rightful place in the motion lineage. They weren't just tinkerers or inventors in isolation. They were architects of programmed motion, loop designers, rhythm engineers, motion theorists. Before we even had those words, they didn't just philosophize. They built their philosophy in brass, in water, in light itself.
Which leaves us with a final thought, something for you to ponder. How does our whole view of innovation, of technological progress, change when we realize knowledge isn't always this single straight line, that sometimes it reroutes, it flows underground maybe, and waits for the right moment, the right conditions to bubble back up? Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other quiet centuries might be holding similar hidden advancements, just waiting for us to look in the right place?